Hello and welcome back to the Cigar Thoughts podcast. I guess technically this is just the Thoughts podcast at our new venue, cigar-free environment, but the spirit of it's the same. With me, as usual, are my two friends and guys whose opinions I respect a lot. We got Brent, editor-in-chief of What's Up Magazine. Matt Nichols, who is a all-conference lineman, Pacific Lutheran University, won a national championship there, and really one of the brightest football minds that I've ever personally known. We're going to talk about last night's game, the Monday Nighter, and take a look forward at Seahawks' upcoming game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Just to get it out of the way, the same way I approached the article this week, and if you're listening, you read the article, I kind of made a deal with my readers that we're going to talk about this call just to get it out of the way, because there is a disproportionate amount of attention being paid to it that sells short what was not only an amazing play, but really a very interesting game. So right off the bat, I was at the game. I was fortunate enough to be there, and I didn't even realize that rule was a thing until after the game. I don't think any players on the field knew it was a thing until after the game. None of the analysts I heard on the radio after the game knew it was a thing. The Lions weren't protesting that, he batted the ball out of bounds. So in my mind, it really was a non-issue, and it's a little disappointing to see how it's dominated the conversation, in my opinion, with regards to the game. But I'd like to get your guys' take. Matt, what did you see? What did you know?
Playing football all the way through my senior year in college, I've never heard of that rule before. I had no knowledge of it. I thought it was fascinating. I was sitting there watching the game, and my father texted me. He goes, "Are you still watching ESPN?" Yeah, this is unreal. I had never heard of it. And then when Steve Young, Trent Dilfer, and Ray Lewis are all talking about
having
no
never heard
clue.
it.
I went back and just immediately hit the rewind to see if Mike Tirico and Gruden had said anything live during that. They had nothing to say about it. That was completely missed by everyone. It's being made a big deal because that was a really bad time for something like that to come up again. And it's Seattle on Monday night after they've had the Golden Tate Hail Mary win against Green Bay a couple of years ago. So I think it's the culmination of all of those things at that time that made it a bigger deal. But again, a rule, one of those obscure rules that I've never heard of, but an incredible play by Cam.
Well, and Mike Holmgren, who was on the competition committee, he had never heard of it. So when coaches are talking about having never heard of it, people who are in, not just coaches, but in high positions, it's easy to get missed, but from the sounds of it, the ref didn't even necessarily miss it. We all have the benefit of a super slow motion and seeing it 20 times. If you're standing right there, it easily could be interpreted as just it hit him and went. That's part of the way this works. This is why we have human refs. We don't have robots. And sometimes it works for you, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I think that, if you were outraged when it happened, because you say, he illegally batted the ball out, then I grant you your outrage and be as mad as you want. If you had to wait to be told that it was a bad call, let it go. The spirit of the play was preserved by the outcome. And it would have been, just step back, forget being a Seahawks fan or a Lions fan or whatever, just as a fan of football. Honestly, the result of that play, what do you feel better about? The Seahawks getting the ball after forcing that fumble, or the Lions getting it back after losing a fumble and starting at the 10-yard line? I mean, I think that, and I hope that I would say this even if it was the other way around, that I think justice was more or less served, and we can contrive our anger if we want, but I think there was a lot else to talk about in that game, and that's what's going to be the crux of this show tonight, is really focusing on the things that are going to have bearing on future performance. Judging by the feedback to the article I wrote last night, the number one topic seems to be the play of the offensive line. And as we do every week, we're going to lean on Matt for his insight in that matter. What did you see? Is it fixable?
Is it fixable? Yes. Because you'd seen progression from the first, second to the third game, this was a regression, make no mistake about it. There were times where it was a scheme thing, and Russell Wilson's getting hit. The play-action pass where Derek Coleman, it goes from an offset fullback position, has to come across the formation to make a block on a blitzer, is probably a schematic issue. Justin Britt getting whooped right away within 2 seconds. is not a schematic. That's just not being able to fight within a phone booth and maintain proper position against a guy. There were other things within it that really concerned me. Russell Okung swinging and missing right away.
Yeah.
There were a lot of just individual misses on top of schematic misses, on top of Russell extending plays and then getting hit afterwards that make you really concerned. I would not be surprised if this were a normal week, if Seattle was played on a Sunday and we're playing another home game, or traveling to a West Coast team, if there wouldn't be a change. They got a short week. They got to make a travel across the country to face a good Cincinnati defense. They might make a change. I'd be a little bit more surprised this week if it wasn't just a normal week.
And what I've heard from Pete Carroll's press conference a couple weeks ago, I think he was looking more at giving it to week 8, so literally giving it half the season before he makes the change.
Are you willing to have your quarterback get hit like he was hit last night for 4 more weeks? Because that's one of the things.
But that's not what Pete does. Pete doesn't look at it that way. And not like I've hung out with Pete Carroll or anything like that, but his approach always seems to be towards the positive.
He made a less than thinly veiled threat at the job security of his offensive line today, though. He did come out and say that if decisions need to be made, then we will make them.
And we've seen them do it in the past.
Yeah.
We've seen James Carpenter sat down. We've seen Patrick Lewis replaced by Lemieux.
The thing about that, though, is, and it's whenever you want to fire Darrell Bevel or get a new coach or a new quarterback, whatever, you better be sure that what you're replacing it with is better. And there's a reason that these are still the 5 guys that we're seeing out there. It's no one, they may be forced into the uncomfortable position of making a change simply because they have to, because they can't get any worse without it. Right. But there is a reason they haven't made those changes yet.
Well, I think one of the issues that they've run into again too is the first week we saw Nowak snap the ball and be off target a few times.
Right.
That went away week 2 and week 3. His snaps were great in the shotgun, and then again last night it reared its head. That was really concerning because that changes. That play becomes almost a dead play immediately if there's any timing involved. Say with the read option, say with a quick pass, say with a play action pass. Anytime a quarterback has to move significantly to get the ball, that play is going to be a busted play. And we saw Russell have one that went off his hands and he had to go run to get. That I think it was 8 yards it cost him. That's one of the most basics of a center. Your first job is to make sure the quarterback gets the ball. And if Drew Nowak's not able to do that consistently, I would be surprised if we see a change there.
Yeah, and that's something you played center. Mm-hmm. That's something like, do you have to be 100%?
For a season, you better miss 1, maybe 2.
Okay.
I put one off. We were playing a game, and we had a receiver go in motion, and the quarterback and I were on different pages with him raising his leg for sending the wide receiver in motion. I bounced it off that wide receiver. Completely my fault. He had to go down to get it. Our quarterback got hit because of my inability to get him the ball and to read it properly. That's the only time that should ever happen. Once a year. You can expect that to happen, but other than that better not happen. And Max Unger wasn't perfect at that either. Thinking back to last year and the previous years, there were times where Russell would have to go down to get balls or move to the side. But Max had more cachet and was able to do more things as a center where you could overlook that, and it wasn't. I think we've seen 5, maybe 6 this year already.
It's been a lot.
That's far too many. Far too many.
Well, then why? Obviously, you're not in Cable and Carroll's head.
Yeah.
But why then is it the starting 5? Why is Patrick Lewis not in there? What is the knock on him? What's the knock on Bailey to not have him in flux there as well?
We saw Bailey at left guard to start the preseason for 1 game, and there was something that they were not happy with, that they were willing to move Justin Brent from right tackle to left guard immediately. And move Bailey out of the rotation. Bailey didn't even slide out to right tackle as a switching of position.
You're watching this flounder so bad.
I don't know if he showed up. They talked about him being in better shape. Right. Bailey being in better shape, being very versatile with being able to play both guards, both tackle positions. And maybe because they have Glowinski, who's a guard, and they have Terry Poole on practice squad, and they have Soakley on practice squad, and they have these guys that have no experience playing a multitude of positions that they need to have Bailey as that backup, or when they go into heavy personnel, come in as that 6th offensive lineman.
Well, you've got, left to right, you've got a left tackle drafted to be a left tackle. And then your left guard is a right tackle.
Who's drafted to be, yep.
Your center is sort of an amorphous player. Your right guard was a right tackle. Your right tackle was a tight end. You have 4 guys learning on the job a new position at the NFL level in a sport and at a level of performance where there is a smaller margin of error than probably anywhere else really in American economy, right? So, in a sense, you have to be patient with that. But it doesn't mean that you have to just sign off on the fact that, oh, hey, Tom Cable is a great offensive line coach, so it doesn't matter who we put in there, he'll figure it out. Is this fixable? Because I'm at to a point where I'm just saying, you know what, it's going to have to be Seattle giving up 14 or less a game, and they can still win and make a deep run that way.
I think that fixable, I think we're going to possibly see some schematic changes with some more 3-step drops. We saw some more screens. They ran that fake pump and then back to Fred Jacson on the screen. The 3rd and 24 draw play, that's you don't really consider that. Screens and draws are 2 things that slow defensive linemen down, along with a hard count. We saw way more hard count last night from Russell Wilson than I've ever seen. And actually, let's credit Seattle's offensive line for something that they did well. They were really good at not jumping. How many false starts have we had in the last couple of years? We had 1 last night, if I remember correctly. So at least let's give them a little morsel of credit while we're piling on them. So screens, draws, hard counts are 3 things that an offensive can do to slow down a pass rush. 3-step drops and those quick slants, quick ins, quick outs are another thing that a coordinator can do to help an offensive line, especially one that's struggling, because Justin Britt got beat that fast. Drew Nowak got beat a couple of times really quickly. They weren't even putting up a good fight. So they're going to have to do some things to change a little bit within their offense to going forward.
Do they have the personnel to get away with that short ins and outs type passing game, that Tom Brady used against the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, for example, right? That's kind of been used as the example of how, you can make up for some deficiencies elsewhere. But they did that against the Rams, and the Rams were happy to give them 4 air yards per target all game long, and it didn't do them a whole lot of good. The number of deep shots that they've taken has been very, very low. You know that Pete Carroll wants to push it, that if nothing else, showing that we're willing to take that shot over the top is really valuable to him. They haven't been able to do it, I think, largely because there haven't been time for that to develop. If I'm a defense facing the Seahawks right now, I think that I am willing to say, you know what, if you can beat me over the top, do it. But I'm jumping your outs, and I'm jumping your crossing routes.
Absolutely. I think any defensive coordinator is saying, let's fight within the first 12 yards. If you can throw anything 12, 15, 25 yards, then take it. But I think they're going to mug Seattle up close. We'll see some more bump and run, an attempt to throw off some timing. We'll see more safeties creeping up, playing closer to the line of scrimmage. You saw Jimmy a couple of times on those quick outs have some success. Lockett's going to be somebody that can do that on a quick slant. Doug Baldwin can get space in a phone booth. That guy is just so ridiculously good. So they have some guys that can do it. That offense is not designed to do that. We see it every now and then when they'll bust it out, but that's not the primary role that this offense plays.
What you mentioned Jimmy Graham, and a lot of the hollering this year has been about how they've been misusing him or don't know how to use him or whatever it is. What have you seen from the way that Jimmy Graham has been utilized in this offense so far?
The thing I noticed with the game and some of the tweets that came out later was his absolutely shitty blocking. And at one play, he basically just pushed the guy, and he went right into Rawls, who was sitting in for the handoff. His blocking seems to suck, and it would be awesome if he was not in that role, because I think less and less of him as a tight end, at least the way the Hawks figured. As far as the throws, I think it's, as I've said before, it's always going to come down to Russell Wilson's going to need to trust that he can just chuck it up there, and he does not have that trust yet. And like a lot of things with the Seahawks, what's happening now is not what's going to be happening in Week 12. There's going to be an element of chucking it up, but Russ has never had a just 50-50 guy, and I think those things are going to come. You see a lot of the stats. I mean, the things came out today of the number of throws he's had was even more, I believe, at this point than the last year against New Orleans, if I remember correctly.
Right now, Jimmy Graham is seeing 22% of the target share in Seattle
versus 19
last year in New Orleans. And I think that this brings up something that needs to remain at the crux of all Jimmy Graham conversations this year. This is a different offense. And if you are going to conflate production with efficiency, you will be frustrated all season long.
Yeah.
The Seahawks pass it literally 15 or 16 times less a game than New Orleans did. At a 22% target share, we're talking 3-4 targets fewer a game, which, given his career reception percentage when targeted, we're talking about 3 less catches per game, just schematically. Yep. We're not talking talent, quarterback ability, anything else, just purely based on opportunity. But here's something. Jimmy Graham's been targeted 23 times this year. Like I said, 22% of Russell Wilson's passes have headed his way. 18 of them, 78%, have been caught for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a passer rating of 127.2. The greatest passer rating in history is 121. Yeah, the volume isn't there, and yes, it's frustrating that we haven't seen the 9-catch, 150-yard, 2-touchdown performance. We might never see that in Seattle from Jimmy Graham. It doesn't mean they don't know how to use him or that he isn't making an impact.
Just for a second, I think it kind of goes back to the general feeling that the Hawks offense is totally out of sync. So it appears more out of sync in certain situations than it actually is. And I think that Jimmy Graham's a perfect example.
The last drive right before halftime is a great example of that. First and goal at the 9-yard line, we come out.
We scored. Oh, that's right. No, not even.
We have house money at least, so at least we got 3. But we come out and we have Jimmy Graham isolated to the top, and then we run it too close to the 2-minute warning, so we come back out after that with a double tight end set to the left, a couple of receivers to the right, and we try to run a very long, slow developing play. Slow developing plays from the 9-yard line when everybody's packed in there typically don't work. If they're going to work, that guy's going to be wide open.
For all the Bevel defending I do, there are some things like that where situationally you got to wonder, what have you seen in the first 28 minutes that makes you think they're going to protect him long enough for this play to happen?
Exactly. But you could see right before that 2-minute warning that they were going to isolate Jimmy Graham up top. They were going to go to that.
And to touch on your point, I think that one thing that will be interesting to see, because I'm not in a position to say, oh, well, they just need to do this. But one thing that will be interesting to see is if they just say, you know what, Luke Wilson and Cooper Helfett are still our tight ends. Jimmy Graham is now our wide receiver 1. And start running him like that and splitting him out wide and saying, you know what, yeah, it's a waste that he's 6'8", 250 and can't block. That sucks. He would be a great blocker. It makes sense that he would be a great blocker. But that's not who he is. And one of the things that I've always admired about Pete Carroll is his willingness to take players for what they're best at and maximize that. And we're not seeing that yet. What we're seeing is this tension between Pete Carroll's insistence that to play tight end in his system, you need to be able to block, and Jimmy Graham's skill set that is so superfluous in one area and so degenerative in another, that at some point you call a spade and find ways to maximize those strengths. That's one thing that I'm hoping to start seeing.
Yeah, and to go back, there were times in which Jimmy blocked really well too. I mean, there were some pass blocks where he was one-on-one and against a DN and did a phenomenal job. His set was good, his leverage was good, his arm angles were good. He actually sat his ass down and did a good job and kept his feet moving. He did a nice job in that. But again, that's not his strength. That's not what's going to bring him here. And is it a skill that he can acquire? I think so. I mean, most tight ends when they come into the NFL aren't good blocking tight ends out of college.
Hey, it'll be really interesting to see how they go about incorporating Jimmy Graham moving forward. But we can spend a lot of time hammering out how they should do it, how they could do it. Pete Carroll knows the system. Pete Carroll has had an incredible amount of success in the last few years with this system. 4 games is still a small enough sample size in the grand scheme of the Pete Carroll system, philosophy, mindset, whatever, to say that, all right, I've got faith that they'll figure it out. So,
I have to, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but as I've been listening to sports radio all day and everything, it's been overwhelming how much the fans, the broadcasters are talking about this team as if it's 0-4, if there's this major dysfunctions, and the bar is set so high that people are losing the ability to enjoy it, I think, and B, to have a realistic understanding of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. We're going to have these incredibly tough games sometimes.
Listen, the Seahawks have been the best team in the NFL for the last 3 years, objectively. They've had the most successful 3-year run, and they have been a 500 team in the first 6 weeks of those 3 seasons. It is okay in the same way that Pete Carroll sees the first half of the game as a prodding the defense, trying to figure out where the weaknesses are, establishing an identity, figuring out what's going wrong, what can we improve on. I think that they approach the season in much the same way. This is that time where it is about figuring things out, because if you take a look at the teams that make the deep playoff runs, that finish at the top of their divisions, and you were to line that up with the standings at the end of September, there's not a lot of correlation. It doesn't really matter who you are in early October. It matters who you are in November, December, and January. And I think that Pete Carroll and the Seahawks understand that and are willing to use this time to establish that and to figure it out. And the defense is good enough to keep them in enough games that they can win half or more of those games while they figure it out. And that's what we're seeing. And I really do want to move to the defense, because what we saw yesterday was a sensational effort.
Unreal.
Yeah.
How good they are.
What stood out to you most about the defense?
It sounds stupid, but it was so strong. Obviously, the last drive against Detroit, they gave up some more of the passes, but they are back to being so fierce. The tackling was by and large crisp. The hits, I mean, the Calvin Johnson coming through the middle and taking that hit from Cam, as Hugh Millen pointed out today. Some wide receiver on another team, 190, 200 pounds, is going to look at that and go, I'm going to get my shoulder dislocated, So you're seeing them firing on.
You see Golden Tate's reaction right before the hit. Yep. You haven't seen it. Go back. You can find it in my article. When Cam lines up Calvin and sits him down, Golden Tate is about 10 yards away watching it happen, and before the hit, he goes like that. It was someone who was very familiar with that outcome. And so that's exactly, I think, what you're talking about. I think that is exactly the impact that a player like Cam Chancellor has, is that, okay, yes, he's good. He's technically good. He's good in coverage. He's good against the run, all of that. There aren't many players at that level that scare other NFL players. It is a rare thing to have a guy, and you've heard the rest of the Legion of Boom talk about, there's a scuffle on the field and Cam shows up, the scuffle's over. Yeah. That is really saying something at that level of alpha gorilla type of machismo that you see.
Cam reminds you of the 70s and the guys in the 70s.
Jack Tatum style.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the guys out there before the rules changed, where you came across, in the middle, you're gonna get your ass knocked down.
And you could see what an incredible job he did of lowering his target.
Yeah.
So he didn't target. You could see that over the years how his hitting has evolved, where he was such an incredible, powerful force, but now he's knowingly lowered his target, and he still delivers an unbelievable amount of momentum.
The thing that blows me away about Cam Chancellor, and if I'm feeling a little bit frisky and got to get out a little pent up whatever, turn on a Cam Chancellor highlight video and takes care of me.
All right.
Honest admission. One of the things...
Safe zone. We're in the tree of trust.
This is a judgment-free area. One of the things that stands out to me when I watch those is his ability to create a highlight-worthy hit without 10 yards of forward momentum. That is so crazy. You saw it when he crumpled. Who was it? Eric Fisher a couple years ago. Who was the guard who was pulling on a run play? And he came in and he was moving sideways, planted 1 foot, and crumpled a 320-pound player. He can be in space and still. Ray Lewis is the only other guy I can think of that could create that kind of power from a standstill. And so anyone can knock out anyone and end up on SportsCenter if they've got 20 yards to line up a receiver doing this. That's just physics. Right. For Cam Chancellor to sit down a Mike Tolbert or a Calvin Johnson without having a full head of steam is a truly powerful talent. And that's something that when you know that whenever he's within 3 yards of you, that you can get hit like that, it does change things. Yeah. It changes the way. These are still human beings that are playing this football game. And so I think that just the mentality that he brings is something that is truly singular and something that you just, I literally can't think of another player right now with that type of intimidation factor.
I can't either. I mean, I was trying to think back of growing up and going to games in the Kingdom of strong safeties that had that kind of game-changing ability. Kenny Easley was a phenomenal free. But there's nobody that's been able to deliver that kind of blow from that position and still cover. It would be one thing if he was just being able to deliver that blow and it was essentially an extended outside linebacker or a rover. He's not. He's damn good in coverage too. You can put him on anybody at any time.
You can make the case that no strong safety has ever mattered more, literally in the history of the NFL, than Cam Chancellor. And that's saying something because he's not the one star on an average defense. He is a star among stars. And the way that, even hearing Richard Sherman, who you can make a very strong argument is the best in the world at what he does, talks about how without Cam, they're just a pack of wild dogs. With Cam, they're a pack of wild dogs led by a lion. Right. When Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman are the dogs to someone else's lion, you are talking about a really ferocious, fearsome player. And it's just so hard to have that in the NFL now where everyone is ferocious and fearsome. So it really is a blessing to have him back. I think that whatever money he was trying to get this offseason, he got it. I think he got it in that game.
I think one of the cool things, too, about watching Cam in the game was you could see him play the full game. Last week when he played, we would see him go for a couple of series, and then Deshaun Shedd would go in as they're trying not to put too many miles on him and make sure he has his wind, doesn't pull a hamstring. All of those types of things that come back from a player that essentially gets 3 days of practice and has to play in an NFL game. Right. We got to see Cam being Cam for a full game, and that's scary for any for any offense that has to line up against that. Seeing that is essentially his first game film of the year.
It definitely, going back to the holdout thought, whatever your opinion was, one way or the other, as he comes back, I think everybody looks and goes, okay, now I remember why you were holding out, because you are so much more than just the highest paid strong safety. You are somebody that does need to be making $8, $9, $10 million.
Right, he is commanding free safety money, and it just shows how positional precedent is so powerful in that, he's the highest paid strong safety certainly by a measure, but there are 13 free safeties that are paid more than him? There ain't 13 free safeties that are better than Cam Chancellor.
There's not 13 defensive players that are better than
exactly what I was going to say.
Right, so, he has been pegged as a strong safety, the same way that Jimmy Graham was pegged as a tight end when it came to trying keeping his salary down. I think that in the same way in the NBA, you're starting to see less of true positions. I think you're going to start to see that in the NFL, which is going to make the CBAs really interesting. But the point is that Cam Chancellor has shown that if Russell Wilson is worth the money, if Bobby Wagner, who had an excellent game yesterday and truly was the tone setter early in that one, if he's worth the money, if Richard Sherman is worth the money, and Earl Thomas is worth the money, then Cam is worth the money.
Kerry Williams, he got a good cut too. I mean, he's making what, six?
It ain't bad.
No, that's
it ain't bad. And he has looked, and then I'm really glad you brought him up.
Yeah.
Because he has been. It's almost like people just started shitting on Kerry Williams the moment he showed up.
Right.
And if you listen for whatever reason, because he's not Thurmond or Maxwell or Browner, because he's the outsider brought in, whatever, who knows? I thought he looked good in training camp. When I saw him, I thought he looked good in the preseason. You got to remember, this is a guy who is learning a different way of playing football in the same way that taking an offensive lineman from the right side to the left side means relearning how to do what you do. Being a isolated man corner versus you're a cover 3 system corner, your responsibilities are different. We're talking about how his first step is different, how his jam technique is different. He's picked it up in no time. And coming into this game, Kerry Williams was the least targeted cornerback in the NFL. He'd been targeted 5 times in 90 coverage snaps.
Wow. If there was a
Richard Sherman had been targeted 8. Yep. People are staying away from him, and then he bowed up hard against Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate.
Well, and if there was a game that was going to expose him on a national scheme, it would be Golden Tate and Calvin Johnson.
Yeah. So I think that
he did a phenomenal job of staying on top of receivers every time, and making sure that you look back at the Philadelphia what's happening to Byron Maxwell, who we all know is a very good cover corner.
I still think he's good.
He's a very good cover corner. That system puts him in a very bad position, puts all cornerbacks in a very bad position. We might have had this preconceived notion, or some fans might have coming over, that Kerry couldn't do what he is doing. He has been just a revelation, absolutely fantastic at that position.
Like the LOB, it's maybe it was me, but the LOB has been E.T., Cam, and Sherm, and then another guy. Byron didn't quite fit in there, in part because it was, you knew he'd be gone by the end of the season. So now, Kerry seems to have fit perfectly within those 3, and you feel the 4 are back whole, and this is a unit. The LOB are.
I'm no longer right. I went in when the season started. I was like, I think there are 2 potential chinks in this armor, just in the secondary. 50% of it, Deion Bailey and Kerry Williams.
Right.
We just don't know. Kerry Williams is learning. Deion Bailey is learning. You can scheme away from Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas, but Kerry Williams has been great. Yeah. With Cam back, this is as good as the secondary has ever been, which is crazy to say about a team that doesn't have an interception yet.
Well, and look at
first time in team history that they haven't had an interception.
And look at how well the linebackers have been playing in pass coverage too, compared to the first game.
Yeah.
We got nickeled and dined to death by Nick Foles and the receivers in St. Louis.
So gross.
Our our linebackers are playing exceptional in pass coverage. Part of that, again, is having Cam back there in the cover 3 and having Cam come up.
It changes the routes that are run against you.
Absolutely. But those guys are playing unbelievable in pass defense as well.
I thought Bruce looked sensational.
Bruce looked amazing. Bobby almost had that first interception.
Yep.
KJ
almost had it. Yep.
With the tip. Their pass defense looked
and then
fantastic.
The pressure.
It's so crazy.
From Averill.
And they didn't have a sack, but Stafford never got a throw from his spot last night.
Yeah, and that is it. And that is something, and I'm so glad you used that phrase, because that's something that's not going to show up in the box score. You can see, no turnovers, no sacks. That's whatever, kind of a toothless defense that just sort of bent but didn't break. That is not what this was. They have forced every quarterback they've faced off their spot. They trail only the Rams in pressure percentage in the NFL this year. The problem is, game 1, the linebackers were out of sorts and couldn't cover the short routes, which is what quarterbacks are looking for when there's pressure. Game 2, it's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback I've ever seen at handling pressure. Literally the best quarterback I've ever seen at handling pressure. But now when you step back and you've got the linebackers in play and you have more normal quarterbacks, getting them off of their spot and having that wide receiver who's running a 15-yard out and he turns and the quarterback isn't set, that route's gone now.
Yep.
That slant that he needs to be able to see right away. If he can't plant his feet and throw with confidence because there's pressure coming from either center up the middle, That route is gone now. And that's why you see so many just checkdowns. It's 3rd and 9, but they're throwing a 3-yard checkdown because it is the only thing there. That's what pressured us. Michael Bennett didn't get a sack. He hit Matt Stafford 3 times, and I guarantee you, I don't know what Matt Stafford thinks, but my guess is if he was talking about the one player that affected his performance the most, I bet you it was Michael Bennett, because Michael Bennett was in his kitchen the entire night. So what we're seeing is the defense getting pressure, the linebackers sticking their tackles, covering that 5 to 15 yard zone, the Legion of Boom being the Legion of Boom. This is now a defense that you can legitimately see giving up 2 touchdowns or less the rest of the way. They haven't allowed an offensive touchdown. You pointed it out during the game. In now 21 possessions since Cam Chancellor got back, 19 punts, the field goal, and the fumble. That is outrageous.
I think and we haven't mentioned that Brandon Mebane didn't play either. Yeah. So, and we lost our nickel corner within the first 2 drives of the game with Burley going out with a thumb injury.
Yep.
They have been able to replenish depth and replenish guys at an alarming pace if you're an opposing team, because Cassius Marsh comes in and has some pressure on the quarterbacks and is chasing
Jordan
Hill played 86% of his defensive snap.
Crazy
That's
for a defensive tackle.
and was good in the fourth quarter. You play a defensive tackle 86% of the snaps, and they're usually hands on the knees, huffing for breath, and aren't able to produce crap in the fourth quarter. He was still motoring, and he was chasing plays, running plays down from the backside. Ataya Rubin making just good, solid plays. That defense has a swagger, and it is the Seahawks are an emotional team to begin with. That defense is even more emotional than the team as a whole, and you can see that they have their swagger, and they're kind of,
that was the one
they have that
thing.
Fuck you attitude.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna beat you and I'm gonna knock you the fuck out.
And every time I go to a Seahawks game, I'm reminded that my favorite thing about being there in person versus at home, because I really like watching the games at home, is in between snaps, during commercial breaks, timeouts, certain songs will come on the PA, and the whole defense just,
it's a dance party.
They're going, they're doing their thing, they're pushing each other, driving around. And if you're peeking up from the offensive huddle and you're seeing Bennett and Averill and Wagner and KJ Wright and Bruce Irvin and on, these guys who are like legitimate tone setters, and they're just swagging out like that, you can't tell me that doesn't matter, because everyone in the stadium sees that. It's not a coincidence that when they come back from commercial break, the crowd is already at a fever pitch. It is the team doing that. Yeah. And when you are so confident in what your assignments are and what the person next to you's assignments are and what the other person next to you's assignments are, then you can relax and you can have that swagger, because you're not worried about, okay, shoot, if it's a 3-step drop, then I got to do this, or if the left guard's first step is this, you just know. It's instinctual, you go. So that's just a really cool thing to see, and I don't think that swagger that you're talking about can come until everyone knows what it is that they're supposed to be doing.
So, I mean, what we're looking at then for the rest of the season is, we are going to just hope that we've got 14 points or less given up by the D, which at this point seems completely reasonable. And then on offense, just hope Russ doesn't get killed and literally killed, and works some magic, and we could score a bit more than D is given up.
How many sacks has Russell Wilson avoided this year? I don't know the answer. This isn't trivial, but is it reasonable to say that he's avoided 15 sacks this year?
I'd say it's reasonable. How many has he
taken? Just 12 to 15.
Yeah.
12 to 15. Yeah. Okay. He has been sacked 18 times this year. He is on pace to be the second most sacked quarterback in NFL history. Any other quarterback, in my opinion, most other quarterbacks, let me say, you're adding 4, 5, 6 more sacks on that. Now you're talking about a quarterback that's being sacked at a historic rate. And we would be remiss if we didn't take a little bit of time before we look at the Bengals game just to say how fortunate the Seahawks are to have a quarterback who can handle it. We could spend 20 minutes talking about it, but there were a couple plays that you saw last night where everything was broken down, and it took Russell Wilson doing what he does to make a play survive. And that's why I have faith between that and the defense that they can get through this first half of the season, figuring things out and testing the fences like the T-Rex to try and see what the weaknesses are, what they need to fix. Yep. For all the nitpicking you can do on Russell Wilson,
I love him.
Yesterday was a reminder of just how important he is. We've talked a lot about the Lions game, covered a lot of the bases that we wanted to hit, but they've got a real challenge coming up. I think that truly they faced 2 of the 10 worst teams in the NFL the past 2 weeks at home. It's what they needed. It was the palate cleanser. It was the mini winning streak that we've been waiting for. Tall order ahead with Cincinnati. Talking about a 4-0 team that has trailed for 1.5 minutes all season. That is firing in every aspect of the game. We're talking about a short week because of the Monday night game. We're talking about a 10 a.m. kickoff. And we're talking about facing a team that right now you can make a case is playing the best football in the NFL. Do the Seahawks have a chance?
Absolutely, they have a chance. With that defense, are you freaking kidding me? And if they threw a shutout, a 3-point, a 7-point game, would any of us be surprised? No, no. I mean, they could be facing any offense in any generation, and would we be surprised if they threw a shutout? No. AJ Green's going to present some issues. Absolutely.
Does he present more issues, though, than a Calvin Johnson does or a Randall Cobb does?
I don't know if he presents more, but he's going to present issues.
Yeah,
I mean, he's not some slappy out there.
Right. He's playing out of his mind.
I mean, if you watched the game last weekend, I saw something in the NFL that I've never seen before. In the red zone, the Bengals came out and had AJ Green split to the right. The defense literally had 2 people out there jamming him in a cornerback position. It looked like a punt. I have never seen a double team with 2 people to jam a wide receiver like that in the NFL. I've seen it in college. I've never seen that in the pros. He's a scary man. AJ Dalton playing some good football right now too.
Yeah, bad Andy Dalton hasn't shown up yet.
Yeah,
and that's what's crazy because I said on my Deep Balls podcast how I think that Cincinnati Bengals have a Super Bowl quality roster, except for at quarterback. If Andy Dalton even plays at 90% the rest of the way, what he's done in the first quarter of the season, this is a team that can beat anybody.
Absolutely.
They are so talented. There's not a weak unit on that team. They can offensively, they can beat you so many ways. I mean, in the same way that this year, Andy Dalton has kind of been the anti-Matthew Stafford. You're talking about quarterbacks with a fairly similar skill set, surrounded by weapons. In Cincinnati, AJ Green, Tyler Eifert has emerged as a great tight end, receiving tight end. You have 2 excellent backs in Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard, a good offensive line, Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones, who are very good 2 and 3 receivers. Tons of weapons similar to Stafford, but Dalton seems so confident and so in control of those weapons. And that's going to be really interesting to see a defense that is playing at peak performance going against the highest scoring offense in the NFL right now.
Well, I think that Cincinnati, you said a little bit about similarities between Detroit. Detroit had no running game. I mean, they really didn't. Their offensive line does not allow them to have a running game. Amir Abdullah couldn't be a very good running back. He was very good at Nebraska. He can be very good for the Lions if they get an offensive line. When you make a team one-dimensional and you're able to sit on pass routes because you really aren't worried about the run, it allows your defense to just play at a faster pace. Cincinnati can run the ball. That defense that offensive line is good. I'll be interested to see if we have Brandon Mebane back and what kind of at what level he's playing at. Is he close to 100%?
Right.
What kind of rotation do we have with our defensive linemen? How much nickel are we forced to play too? Because versus Green Bay, we were in nickel essentially the whole game. Last game versus Detroit, we were able to play a lot of our base defense. So the matchups are going to be fascinating in this game going forward.
Brent, what are you expecting to see?
I'm expecting it to, it doesn't go out on a limb to say it's going to be a tight game. I mean, I think we're going to have the D will bend more than we've seen, obviously, going up against such an offense. So the big matchup for me is how our offense, in their beautiful sputtering ways, will face the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And with the Hawks, you don't know if this is going to be the week where all of a sudden it all clicks and they just gun it. So it looks like Lynch will be back. So you can expect some type of improvement in the offense with the running game being solid again, allowing him to kind of spread it out with the receivers. Incidentally, going back to Detroit, it was awesome seeing B.J. Daniels get a catch.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
Fantastic.
That was cool. Yeah.
So, we'll see it. To me, it depends on how well that offense is going to do against the Bengals defense, which is playing well.
And I think finishing drives is something they have to do. They have to end up in the end zone and quit settling for Hauschka to kick field goals.
I don't think 13 is going to be enough.
He's so damn good at kicking field goals, and we need to be really appreciative of what a darn good kicker we have.
Especially he has bailed out 3 or 4 drives this season.
Absolutely. And you look around the NFL with Buccaneers just cut their kicker, who is 6 for 12 with 2 missed PATs. We have such a good kicker. We need to give him some pub about that.
It always seems like the consolation prize because our offense wasn't competent enough to get in.
We're moving. We're about ready to go to the end zone, and then we shoot ourselves in the foot. Yeah. We need to quit shooting ourselves in the foot and get in the damn end zone more often.
Yeah, they're going to have to score. I truly think Seattle's going to have to score 3 touchdowns to win this game. Cincinnati is so good. They're so good at home. They are, right now, confidence is half of it.
They believe.
Right? And they believe. There is literally no reason for them right now to think that anyone can stop them because no one's come close to doing it yet. So if the defense can bow up and hold Cincinnati under 20 points in this game, I will be extremely impressed.
And that is 100% feasible.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean,
do the Seahawks win?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Guess we'll find out next week. I appreciate you guys coming out to join us down here every Tuesday at the Grand Avenue Ale House on Grand Avenue in Bellingham. Come see us, have a beer, come say hi. And for Brent and Matt, this is Jacson. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks.